Good evening. On the 21st of December 1988, I was on a bus with my youth club. We were travelling home from the Edinburgh Playhouse Theatre, where we had all been to see a musical. We were very noisy and very excitable. It was the start of a 2-week Christmas holiday. Suddenly, the bus driver asked for quiet so we could hear breaking news on the radio. Reports were coming in that a jumbo jet plane carrying 259 passengers had crashed into the town of Lockerbie, the town we were travelling home towards. Of course, in those early reports, nobody knew what had actually happened, but mass hysteria spread on the bus. Many of the teenagers on the bus lived in Lockerbie with their family and loved ones, and hearing that their hometown was in chaos and ablaze was naturally terrifying. I remember a moment of instant relief. I knew my mother was safe. She was leading the trip, and with us. Over the coming days and weeks, the impact of the terrorist attack on Pan Am Flight 103 became clear, and our community was caught in the eye of a media storm that unfolded the single biggest act of terrorism in British history even now. My memory of that time is very powerful, but also fogged by time. And as is the case with memories of traumatic experiences, sometimes it is the seemingly insignificant and small details that remain clearest in our minds. A few days after the atrocity, BBC News reports on the television showed the inside of my school assembly hall. I had played my double bass in the same hall just a few days previously in the school Christmas concert. Now, our assembly hall was a scene of horror, where it was being used to assemble luggage and body parts in bags that had scattered for miles around Lockerbie. Amidst that, what caught my eye was the sight of my double bass. It was at the back of the hall, on the stage, exactly where I had left it a few nights before on the last night of the Christmas concert. It was a shocking image, really difficult for my 14-year-old mind to process. Much more horrific news was to unfold. 2 of my classmates' lives had been obliterated. Paul Somerville died with his mother, father, and little sister Lindsay. We remember Paul as a brave, sharply intelligent, proud to be different, and unashamedly geeky. He was an avid train spotter and stamp collector. My friend Stephen Flanagan's mum, dad, and little sister Joanna were killed when a large section of the plane's wing destroyed their home. Stephen survived only because he was at a friend's house fixing his younger sister's bike by way of a surprise Christmas gift. When he returned to his house, there was nothing there, just a 10-meter crater where his family and home had been. Somehow, Stephen came through this horror to enrich the lives of many of his friends and peers for years to come. As teenagers growing up in Lockerbie, we focused on and put a great deal of effort into not talking about the tragedy that befell our community. 30 years ago, our knowledge of psychological support and neuroplasticity were not as advanced as they are today, and my classmates, my teachers, and the town at large were left alone to face the unknown. Of course, very many people were trying to help, and our school received large sums of money from across the Atlantic. But money cannot cure grief. and it cannot mend broken lives. Those of us fortunate enough to have positive role models and strong relationships could move forward and began once more to be optimistic about our futures. The tragedy that befell our community in Lockerbie took its toll on everyone, but some people suffered more than others, and some of my peers suffered into adulthood. No one back then could say why some of us were able to make sense of our experiences and move on, and others could not. I was fortunate, and I chose to pursue a career in education as a teacher. It has been a hugely enjoyable career that has brought me much joy, and the longer I spent in teaching teenagers, the more comfortable I became talking about my experiences in Lockerbie in 1988. And I would speak with colleagues about it, and also at times with students. In the year 2011, I became the head teacher of the Peebles High School, a wonderful secondary school in the Scottish borders. Along with the enormous sense of responsibility that comes with becoming the head teacher of a large secondary school, there was a nagging but persistent thought at the back of my mind. What if something like Lockerbie were to happen in our school? How would we respond? And there were present issues to address. An increasing number of young people in our school and in other schools across southern Scotland were finding an increasing number of young people reporting as having mental health issues and requiring support in being resilient enough to face their presents as well as their unknown futures. Naturally, I and my colleagues wanted to do everything we could to support the young people in our school. And in 2017, Scottish Borders Council took the decision to address that issue. And in March 2017, they trained all of their head teachers in the Growing Confidence Project. The Growing Confidence Project raises awareness in schools of factors that influence resilience and well-being. It is led by a lady called Patty Santelises. She is an inspirational trainer and leader. And after completing the training in Growing Confidence, I felt very excited professionally. Building resilience in young people became a key facet of our school improvement plan for last session. And I ended the academic session full of professional excitement for the year ahead. My personal life was going along very well too. My wife and 3 children and I had just moved into our dream home. We were very happy with our situation and very excited about our future. But that was soon to change, sadly. On the 6th of July, 2017, I took my 2 eldest children, Rory and Tess, to the tennis courts for a game of tennis. We were just a few days into the holiday we'd planned to spend playing with our children, gardening, and doing DIY to perfect our dream home. I had been feeling unwell for a couple of days with a very stiff neck and a sore headache. After watching Rory and Tess play a few games of tennis, I stood up to join in. But no sooner had I stood up to join in than I collapsed on the courts. It was I remember it very clearly. It was a terrifying experience. My son was fantastic. He remained calm, he asked good questions, and he summoned help. My daughter caught my eye. She looked terrified, and I thought, I must avoid dying here. I must avoid this. I do not want this to be an adverse childhood experience for my children. I have seen all the TED Talks on this topic. I know what harm ACEs can cause to young people in later life. I must thank Nadine Burke-Harris for her inspirational insights on this field. But as I lay on the tennis courts, I couldn't help thinking, please don't die here. please stay alive for my wife and for my kids. Of course, by that point, things were beyond my control. It transpired that I had torn my right carotid artery here. The bleeding from this torn artery formed a clot. The clot was dislodged to the right hemisphere of my brain, where it induced a catastrophic stroke. I was taken by emergency helicopter to the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital in Glasgow. When I arrived, my condition deteriorated as my brain continued to swell. And overnight, I contracted pneumonia. My wife was taken aside and told it was unlikely that I would survive. But with good fortune and highly skilled medical staff, I survived. My life was saved when a neurosurgical team removed a large part of my skull to relieve the swelling in my brain and stored it in my abdominal wall. I lived. At first, I had absolutely no sensation or movement in my left-hand side. After 3 months, I could not stand up or attempt to take a step without falling over to the left-hand side. After 4 months, the bone that had been removed from my skull and stored in my abdominal wall was replaced, but that operation was unsuccessful, and I was required to wear an attractive plastic helmet to protect my brain until such time as a permanent titanium plate could be fitted sometime in 2018. The inspiration for today's talk came one day when I was lying in hospital in Dumfries and Galloway Royal Infirmary, and my consultant physician approached my bed and she said very matter-of-factly, "Campbell, what do you know about neuroplasticity?" The healthy grey cells I had flickered into activity, and I said, "I know a lot about this. I know that the neuroplasticity of newborn babies' brains is phenomenal. Every day their brains make new pathways and synapses, and they can learn hundreds of new things. I also know that the teenage brain has a credible ability to develop new neural pathways." How did I know this? Because Patty Santelises had taught me in the Growing Confidence Project that we can change outcomes for teenagers with high adverse childhood experience scores because their brains are so adapted to change and becoming more positive and developing new pathways. She looked quite impressed with me and said, "Good, because if you're going to believe in your ability to recover mobility and your cognitive function comes back, you're going to have to believe in the ability of your brain to change." When I started to have hope that improvements were possible, my recovery gained pace. I found that the harder I worked in physiotherapy sessions, the better I became. The more I slept after exercise, the more my brain seemed to remember the next day the things that I had been working on the day before. And so, here I am, alive, and happy to be here with you this evening. Thank you. As you can see, I have not been left totally unaffected by my stroke. My left hand and arm have little functionality. And while I have not returned to work at Peebles High School, which is my ultimate goal, I have returned to work with the same employer. And I have been able to start to use my 22 years experience of working with teenagers, my training in building resilience, my knowledge of recovery from neuroinjury, and I have been able to contextualize all that knowledge to use a day like today to share it and let other people know what we can do to help teenagers. And I have discovered that the things that make me resilient today are the same things that made me resilient in 1988. They are the same factors. The most important, a supportive and loving family who will support and love me unconditionally through all life's tragedies, obstacles, and hurdles. The willingness to take on new learnings and new challenges and new hobbies and interests. To keep learning every day and to be determined in what I do. And these are the same things that made me resilient in 1988. I want to be a role model of resilience for young people. I am proof that the brain can and does change when we do the right things. I want to inspire young people that their futures are not fixed. However difficult their pasts may have been, they too can change their brains. I am proof that the brain can and does change, that we can overcome massive challenges and adapt our brains to be more resilient in testing circumstances. The teenage brain is particularly good at this, which is why promoting positive mental health at the teenage stage is so important. We need to make sure that teenagers know how amazing their brains are. By teaching them this, we will empower young people to be better able to face their unknown futures and challenges than myself and my classmates were back in 1988. You can help the teenagers in your life, if you have any. I hope you do. Build secure relationships with them. Be a role model of resilience, and be sure that you repeatedly make them feel that they can trust their relationship with you. By ensuring that what teenagers repeatedly feel, think, and do is positive, we can develop their brains to be habitually positive and resilient. It is vital that young people know that change is possible, and I hope my presence on this stage has inspired you to believe that is the case too. Thank you very much for your attention.